Let's turn our attention to this devastating international news and the death toll in the Turkiye, Syria earthquake, fast approaching 30,000. The only chance of finding survivors at this stage are now fading and fading quickly. It's been almost a week now since a 7.8 magnitude earthquake and 7.7 magnitude earthquakes hit Turkiye and Syria respectively. Cities in the southern parts of Turkiye and northern Syria are completely flattened, leaving millions stranded. Let's get the latest from our reporter. It's senior reporter Dasen Thathia, who's in Turkey for us. Hello to you, Dasen. Where are you now as I see the devastation behind you? Just give us a sense of what you're seeing and where exactly you are.
And Gareth, I'll tell you, that's a microcosm of what we're really seeing here. This is just one of the scenes that the team has been to. We are in Antakya. We're still here. There is a lot of work going on in this area.
She's my sister. She's under the wall.
I'm sorry. We were just with the search team, ma'am. I'll move away. Thank you. Gareth, I'll just have to relocate myself. That's one of the family members that's here. We were just going with the search team, the Gift of the Givers team that's here. They're moving in because they were called to this scene. As you can see, emotions are very high. People are gathered around these sites, and it's hard to tell sometimes which one of them, or which of those are family members. In this case, she's identified herself and she says that her sister is under that rubble. But this is not the only scene that we've been to like this. A short while ago, we were moving through town, and we found people that were angry, approaching the search team, saying to them that some of their relatives have been trapped under this rubble for days, that they wanted help sooner. But again, if you look at the extent and the magnitude of this, it's almost every building that looks like the one behind me. There are places that still haven't been reached, and I think that's where the international assistance comes in. Teams like the ones from South Africa, from Singapore, from China, from Serbia. There are a number of teams that have come through that have now lent a hand to Turkey because they are overwhelmed. I'll stay here at a safe distance so as not to disrespect the family, Gareth, because you'll see from here just the corner of what's actually happening. Or just over there, that's an apartment block that has collapsed, like many of them here. There are lots of high-rise buildings in this area, and some of them housing families. I could tell you stories, just based on what we've seen in the past few days and the past few hours. A short while ago, just before we got here, in fact, while the Gift of the Givers team was working at one location, we met a man just a few meters away, and he was telling me a story about how he had escaped with his sister from an apartment block. But collectively, he'd lost about 33 family members during this time. In fact, some of them were living in that apartment block, others nearby. And while we were having that conversation, his neighbors were pulled out of that rubble by community members that had taken it upon themselves to search that area. And it was a Syrian couple and their 3-year-old child that was taken out. They used a digger and they moved this rubble aside and then placed them on the side of a street covered in blankets.
And Dasen, obviously understandably moving the camera position away from that family member, as you say, sister is trapped under the rubble. I've also seen, apart from Gift of the Givers, we've seen another rescue organisation. Now, I know you've dealt with them before. They've gone over with you. I believe SARS are identifiable by their yellow shirts as well, members of the search and rescue organisations going over. But since you've been there, for those who are not following Dasen Thathia on social media, by the way, especially on Twitter, please do that. You've been experiencing some tremors. I want to be careful with my wording. I don't want to say aftershocks. I don't want to say tremors. So you tell me what you've been experiencing. But there has been movement, hasn't there?
There has been, Gareth. Initially, on the first night that we got here, some of the team members were saying that they felt something, and we just thought, I guess all of us were tired, and maybe our minds were playing tricks on us, and maybe it wasn't anything at all. And it was that night that we all went to bed. And since then, there have been at least 2 other instances, and last night was the worst of them. In fact, yesterday there was again, I'm not an expert, but it felt like a tremor, and those around us said that it was a tremor. It lasted about 7 seconds or so, and it felt like a wobble. It felt like a movement of the ground, but it happened while we were sitting outside at around, at around 8 o'clock, and we are currently based at a stadium. And one of the members was just walking around the periphery of the stadium, and he said that he heard parts of the ceiling falling off during that time. because of that shake. So it left all of us a bit concerned. But even when we stand in areas like this, I'll just show you, we are constantly being warned by those that are here, as you mentioned, the search and rescue teams, both from SASA, Gift of the Givers, even the international teams. You'd find people coming up to you in other languages and just ushering you away. This is how this city is structured. Like this you're seeing here, a high-rise building, yet another one. So you are working in this area and you're working and you're kind of focusing on one of those apartments that have been brought to the ground. It's easy to forget that there are others that are still standing, but precariously so. Pieces of them are missing. There's problems with the structural integrity. Some of them are slanting badly. In fact, I think I'll go as far as to say that almost all of the buildings that we've seen have had some kind of damage. This shot will give you an idea of the horizon. But again, even this part of town still looks better than what we've seen. But Gareth, I think another important conversation to have is about the resilience of these people. And what we've seen so far is such a degree of hospitality. Unfortunately, I was relaying the story to our colleague Marcel earlier, but I want to share it with you because the network broke up during that time, as you would understand. While we were standing outside one of these apartment blocks, there was a man there who saw my colleague Linga and I, and he offered us some water because he realized that, we've been working out in the sun and we probably were thirsty. And when we got to talking to him, we found out that he'd actually lost his family members and he was waiting for some news of 2 family members that were under this rubble. So that's something that's been happening to us quite a bit. People have been handing out food and handing out water. And then you find out that these are victims. These are people that in some instances are displaced and have been handed food, but even with the little they have, they want to share that. And I think that tells a story in itself.
No, it really is a story all by itself. The compassion of the humanity, despite what they've been through, that one person, as you said, losing over 30 family members, but still coming out and was more interested in your well-being than their own, which I find fascinating. And Dasen, as I say goodbye to you, last question, I was going to orientate our viewers. I'm sure you would as well. So obviously you would have headed up to Istanbul. I see now that you're about 1,200 kilometers southeast in this area, and I hope I get the name right, Antakya or Antakya. You're very close to the Syrian border as well.
Antakya.
And are the two countries, the two states, are they working together? Are they sharing information? Not going political from a rescue effort side, but you're very close to Syria now within Turkey. What's the cooperation been like between the two countries? Are they working together?
Well, as you know, because of the dynamics in Syria, that has been something that has been fairly difficult. In fact, even getting aid across, and some of the international organizations that wanted to work in Syria did have some difficulty. So as much as they were affected, it seems that there's also little information that's coming out. There's also not as much help that is reaching that country for whatever reason. But on the flip side of that, you also have, especially where we are now, lots of people from Syria that are living in these towns. We've met quite a few. We've also heard stories of apartment blocks that mostly had Syrian refugees, and there were people that had passed away amongst those. And because we are that close, you'll find that they had over the years been an influx of some of these Syrians living here. So certainly, despite the dynamics, you'll find that during this time, I guess they are intertwined in this disaster that they are facing as countries.
And Dasen, I'll leave this really as my last question. I'm trying to get as much out of you as I can while the signal is good. It's one of the rare chances it's working as well. Where to next from where you are now? How long are you planning to stay where you are? I know you're with Gift of the Givers. You're going with the search and rescue teams. Is there a plan for how long you stay where you are now before moving on somewhere else, or how does this work?
I want to summarize that for you, and we also were trying to get a sense of how this was going to work because of the many teams that are here, and there has to be some kind of coordination because these teams are working flat out. And if there's no coordination, you'll find that, for example, this team would start its work here, and then later on another team would come back and do the same kind of work. So fortunately, this has all been coordinated by the Disaster Management Agency to a certain extent. But at the same time, the Gift of the Givers is clear that they are here largely to support the other teams that are working around the area. So they will stay in Antakya for probably the next week to help. They also have a lot of high-tech equipment that they're using. Earlier, they drilled a hole into one of the buildings, or what is left of one of the buildings, and then tried to use a device to listen, to hear if there was any sound coming out. There were survivors that were found today and yesterday. So that's where their expertise will be used. It doesn't necessarily mean that each team that starts will spend the entire day or 2 days on that site. Everyone offers a little bit, and ultimately the goal is to try to get as many survivors as possible. Many thought that you wouldn't be finding survivors at this stage 7 days later, but the good news, and I use the term loosely, is that there are still survivors, and we're also hearing that some of them are still okay, in good health, without broken bones, managed to somehow get into a void so they were not crushed. But those stories, again, are few and far between, but nevertheless, they are happening.
Yeah, I thank heavens for that. Those stories are still there. It keeps up the hope of search and rescue. And Dasen, even you and Linga, our camera expert, is with you, our camera engineer. It must be difficult to see all this devastation. So you stay positive, stay safe as well, please, you and the entire team. And for those watching who have obviously been following Dasen for many, many days now on this, please do yourself a favor. If there's one Twitter account you go follow, it is at Dasen Thathia. I'm just looking at some of the photos and the videos, and what you're seeing on screen there behind Dasen is only what we're able to show you, just in the small block that he is. But please go follow Dasen Thathia. Just send him your support. It's important for him and Linge and all the teams there. Dasen, you stay safe. I'm sure we'll touch base again. Dasen Thathia, senior reporter in Antakya in Turkiye here on eNCA.